Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Fortin with Michigan Matters. Um, and today we have a fantastic guest today. We had a great big victory in Michigan for election integrity last week. Stefanie Lambert and the Adams Township Clerk, Stefanie Scott, were fully vindicated by the judge. And it's sickening what's been going on in Michigan and other states, this lawfare stuff, dragging innocent people, making up all kinds of crimes and so on and so forth. So anyway, we invited Stefanie, and she's gracious to be here. And I'd like to bring her on now. Thanks for being here, Stefanie.
Thank
And
you for having me on, Mark. It's so good to see you again.
it's an honor. And congratulations. You
Thank
had a
you.
victory for Michigan, big time for freedom and liberty and proper elections. And I'd just like to hear from you exactly what happened because I read a couple of articles, but they're news articles, and what's all true and what's not in today's news articles, or what's left unsaid. So anyway, I just like to give it to you, and please tell us what happened last week and why.
Sure. Well, Mark, for the past several years, the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have been on a warpath to attack clerks, questioning data and evidence, and attorneys working on behalf of clients. And that's what happened here. Initially, the Adams Township clerk, Stephanie Scott, was getting attacked by Jonathan Brader of the Michigan Department of Elections. He was the director under Jocelyn Benson. And Jonathan Brader routinely tells clerks that he has authority that he doesn't actually have within law. It threatens them with misdemeanors if they don't listen to him. He's a tyrant. And Stephanie Scott was elected in November of 2020. She did not run the 2020 election, but we all remember what was happening in November and December of 2020. The country was going crazy. Everyone was questioning data. And when Stephanie took office shortly after the 2020 election, she wanted to read the contracts, read the law, and learn what she was supposed to be doing on behalf of Adams Township. She has an engineering background. She's super bright, really, really intelligent clerk with a full time job, by the way. She was doing this to serve her community, and she started digging into the data, and she found some fraudulent registrations. She found ones that the signatures, the spelling of the signature didn't match the actual registration. So she, without realizing it, raised a red flag at the Secretary of State's office when she was questioning, and they saw that she was in the qualified voter roll reconciling data, as she should as clerk. So shortly thereafter, she was given numerous directives that didn't make sense and were not lawful from Jonathan Brader. One of the directives was to produce the Adams Township tabulator for an update. So she went to the contract and learned from the contract it wasn't due for an update, and was very concerned that this could wipe the 2020 data that she was required to preserve pursuant to 52 USC 20701, federal law to delete data, right? So she said, I'm concerned that this update that the contract says we're not due for would delete the data. She was also told to confirm that she had deleted her EPB data. EPB data is the electronic poll book data from Adams Township. And that also would have been a federal violation. And then he wanted her to sign the certificates that the clerk signed after logic and accuracy testing. He wanted her to agree in writing that she was going to sign these. And, she gave a logical response of how can I sign something that the test was okay if we haven't performed the test, right? So she was pushing back, following the law. She was getting threatened with misdemeanors, so she retained me. I was her attorney. And I said, you can't have the tabulator without a search warrant, which they had no legal basis to get one. But they went and made up a legal basis and had the district court judge obtain the tabulator by search warrant. And then they sent it to Hart in Texas. The Michigan State Police did that. So Stephanie Scott was required to keep it under lock and key, and the very data that she wanted to preserve went to Texas. We now know Hyder Garcia is in charge over at Hart in Texas, and you can do your own research on Hyder and his background, but this is not a good thing, okay? So let me go back to the EPB data. The EPB data in Adams Township shows, and this is why we were targeted. It shows who voted in a precinct and in a city and in a township. It's a list of the voters. And so when her EPB data was compared with an expert as to who Adams Township certified as voting, it matched as it should. Of course, that should match. It also matched who the Hillsdale data as to who Adams Township had certified as voting. It should also match. But this is where it differed at the state level. A FOIA request was done to the state of Michigan asking who the state recorded as voting in Adams Township, and it was off by 11.5%. Okay, so this was not an anomaly. Other clerks refused to delete the EPB data, and in some jurisdictions it was off by 4%, 8%, 12%, 15% in some places. And if you extrapolate these numbers roughly, it's the very number that Jonathan Brader, who was also the director of ERIC for the 2020 election, inflated the Michigan voter roll just weeks prior to the 2020 election by 700,000. And in his newsletter, he told the clerks, you're not going to see a paper trail at the local level. We're doing this through the driver database. So Stefanie raised red flags. She was looking at data and she found the very, issue they wanted to hide. And that's why we were targeted. So this is now under federal investigation. Mr. Brader, I believe, is under federal investigation. And the Judge Lisney, finally looked at the law. The district court held numerous hearings. We had all sorts of testimony, both from Mr. Brader, where he admitted to violating laws under oath. We had Benjamin Cotton, who's a great expert, was Stephanie Scott's expert. Ben has testified whistleblower, where he was the one that discovered China had infiltrated the U.S. military computer systems. The Department of War addressed that. He's an excellent expert. And we heard testimony from him, and we heard testimony from the state. There was a witness that Mr. McAlpine, he couldn't comply with the audit of the BOE because the EPB data had been deleted. And in fact, he had asked Ms. Scott for her data. So we had, 2 years of hearings, and the judge didn't analyze the law. So finally, we got to the circuit court, and we had raised, this is not the first time these issues have been raised as to the made up law by the Attorney General's office. We had been trumpeting it for 2 years that they were making up law. But finally, this judge actually looked at the law, and she said, we can't make up statutes out of thin air. It has to go through the legislature. And that's exactly what the Attorney General's office was doing in this case.
Wow. I had a question. I didn't want to interrupt you, though, because I didn't want to mess up your train of thought. But I think you mentioned that Stefanie Scott in 2020 was newly elected.
That's right. She did not run the 2020 election. She was elected in that election, and she just came into office, and the country was,
Yes.
it was it was a contentious time, and she just wanted to know how to do her job and do it properly.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because in Macomb County, we had a newly elected clerk also. And I was the county chair at the time, and my vice chair was Lisa, and she was at TCF Center all day, like over 100 other challengers. And of course, we don't have all day to go over all that. But the thing is, we encouraged our new county clerk to look into things too. And then finally, he did do an audit, and at the request of my vice chair, he invited Mr. Cotton. And but Mr. Cotton wasn't really allowed to do much. And it's interesting because I have an affidavit from Mr. Cotton about that particular audit. But it's interesting how one new clerk is a hero and the other one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So the hero is a newly elected clerk. So all of our incumbent
Stefanie Scott, you're talking about, correct?
Yes, right. Absolutely. So Stefanie, newly elected, representing her county or community, I should say, sees something wrong and stands up for the community. But all the incumbent clerks across the state sat silent when they are told to destroy stuff in 7 days or whatever. I just find that very interesting. But
Well, I know about that affidavit from Mr. Cotton, right? I think Mr. Cotton was willing to audit the Macomb data,
yes,
but Mr. Forlini reached out to the Secretary of State and she said, oh, it has to be pro V&V or a certified vendor, which is actually not the law. She made it up. And so Mr. Forlini listened to that, and pro V&V where they have a conflict, right? Pro V&V is involved in
absolutely.
getting the certifications to begin with, right? So of course they're never going to expose the issues that they neglected when they certified the equipment, but it's a different issue. Ben Cotton observed Pro V&V fail to use a right blocker in Macomb when they did the imaging. The right blocker is the tool, the forensic tool, that it's industry standard. This is nothing special. It should be used in every scenario where there's data being copied. And if it's not, you can potentially manipulate the data, and the forensic image is not a reliable one. And so Ben put that in his report, that their Pro V&V was there to do an audit and didn't even use a right blocker. So Mr. Forlini, I've actually served with a letter demanding a retraction. He was on a stage and referred to me as a criminal in the course of his campaign. I have not received a retraction yet of that statement. These charges have been dismissed. As I've said all along, the Attorney General's office was making up law and did so to silence the clerk, have her illegally removed from office. Stefanie Scott was locked out of the qualified voter roll after she exposed fraud, removed from her office, was not able to serve her community. And this has a ripple effect of clerks across the country. Who would want to run for election when you have to deal with the tyrant Jonathan Brader, who's
Yep.
doing illegal things and threatening the clerks, right?
Yep.
So the statute where they're stating that the data that Ben Cotton reviewed, they said it was confidential, which was their theory on how it was illegal, and this is not at all what the statute says, is the very statute that the state has told the feds that they can't have the voter rolls. They said, we can't give you confidential data. Well, they're making up the word confidential. So now the state needs to turn the voter rolls over to the Department of Justice, as the Department of Justice has demanded.
I'm hoping that the Department of Justice gets involved in Michigan because I think the corruption is unbelievable. And what this Mr. Brader has done, violating law, and one of the laws I understand is something about altering public records, and they altered voter ID numbers, and they altered voter history, and I guess that law comes with teeth. It's a felony if convicted and with serious time. So I'm hoping that we
There
get a
are
new
a
attorney
number
general.
of statutes that
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Brader has violated. He's ordered the destruction of data. The data is changing at the state level. He's committing unauthorized practice of law. He's an attorney, but not a Michigan barred attorney. He's from New York. He worked for the Brennan Center. We know all about the Brennan Center and the ties to Obama. Not that this should be political. It's not. It's data. But Mr. Brader couldn't come to one of the hearings. We had to set the date at a different date because he was going to Martha's Vineyard. He's a very well-connected individual running the elections for the state of Michigan at the state level, and lying to clerks in these letters that he threatens them with. So there's a number of crimes that, in my opinion, he's committed, and it's under investigation.
Wow. So with our new DOJ in Washington, um, I'm in hopes that something is done about this because I don't expect much out of Michiganders. I don't expect much out of. We're hoping Republicans take this election naturally, but I don't expect much done by the winners, Secretary of State and Attorney General. Um, I'd be very surprised if they dug into this, and they ought to. But
Well, it's a shame, and it's continuing to take place. Vicky Bishop of Antrim County is currently under attack by Jonathan Brader. So this is years of him using his office to weaponize. And Vicky Bishop came in. I think you remember she replaced Cheryl Guy who ran the 2020 election on behalf of Antrim County, had admitted on video to deleting data. Vicky Bishop likely has access to records from Antrim County as clerk. So it seems to me that there's a motive on behalf of Mr. Brader to find a reason to remove, although he doesn't have the legal authority to do so, Vicky from office.
So, what could be a next step for her? I mean,
Well, I've heard that Vicky is retaining counsel and fully intends to litigate what's going on with, and this is just rumor. I don't know this,
yeah,
but I don't think she's going to tolerate the lies from Jonathan Brader. I think the clerks in Michigan are done with Jonathan Brader's lies.
good. Well, and now what about Stephanie Scott and you? You guys have been unjustly charged. You went through all of this expense and so on and so forth on behalf of all of us. And is there any possibility of you uh, being made whole?
Well, I have one more case that I'm in the middle of litigating right now, and that's before the Michigan Court of Appeals. I was charged, Matt DePerno was charged, and Representative Dare Rendon were charged. And this case was also retaliation and weaponization against the individuals involved with the Antrim County litigation. If you remember, in Antrim County, the most compelling expert reports were filed related to the 2020 election. Jim Penrose, the former technical director of counterterrorism for NSA, Ben Cotton, Doug Logan, and Jeffrey Lambert of National Sandia Labs showed exactly how the votes flipped, and it's not the Secretary of State's version with the Halderman report. They showed how Halderman was wrong, all of the failures in what he neglected to look at in his own report. And then they described file by file, and there's thousands of files on the Antrim EMS, as to how the votes actually shifted and the remote logons and the international interference in the Michigan election for 2020. Uh, so then I think it was about a year later, several months later, I'd have to go back and look at the timing. Dana Nessel released a press release where she called us the Naughty Nine, right? There was a law enforcement investigation going on. She listed all of the experts, the attorneys, the state representative. She targeted us unlawfully again. And that case is now before the Michigan Court of Appeals in a rare move. The Court of Appeals is considering the law in advance of trial because once again, it was made up to prosecute us. So this was designed to interfere with my practice of law. Same thing for Matt DePerno. Silence the clerks and just harass us for several years. So of course we'll pursue accountability down the road. But we're still in the process. This has been a 6-year long fight. It's been awful. Um, I mean, it's just, I don't want to complain, but it's been awful what they've done to us. And we haven't done anything wrong other than represent clients, expose evidence, and pursue truth and justice.
You know, I've been thinking about this for some time after watching what happened to General Flynn and I believe Navarro, and
Peter
you,
Navarro.
yeah, and our electors. Um, all you people have suffered so much uh, by being falsely accused. I wish there was some way. I don't imagine. I imagine legally it's the only way is to go to court and everything. But don't you think the legislature could do something about if someone is falsely accused, being made whole somehow, if found innocent? I mean, I know that kind of
Well,
opens up.
I think there can be accountability through every branch, right? She could be recalled, Dana Nessel. The legislature certainly could move to address, there's funding. I think Matt DePerno has
Mhm.
worked with the legislature as it relates to some of that. But then there's the judicial branch where if we bring suits as it relates to the malicious prosecution, and I think you recall when she was, publicly saying that they were going to pursue charging us with felonies. I said I was going to sue them. I said that right then. I said, we haven't done anything wrong and I will sue you. And I meant that. This is terrible what they've done. It's just, it's been awful, and it was designed to take up my time, which it did for several years.
Destroy your reputation.
Destroy my reputation. I was a prosecutor in Wayne County for years. Never had a bar grievance. This was just awful. It was true weaponization. But you're talking about the national picture a little bit, and and you're right. They did this on a national scale. Misty Hampton of Coffee County, Georgia, was charged initially. She was the clerk there. She was on YouTube. You can look her up. Coffee County YouTube video where she's showing what's going on with the Dominion equipment and how the adjudication system can change votes. There was Tina Peters, who was weaponized against in Colorado. They went after the local clerks to silence them so that instead of Michigan being decentralized, we had a dictator at the Secretary of State's office asserting power that she was never given by the state constitution or by the legislature.
Wow. Well, I tell you, I'm so glad you came on here today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Mark. I'm so glad you're covering this for Macomb. Macomb is just, obviously a key place in Michigan for elections. It's a big county, and we need accurate elections, and more than just a show, right? The audit that took place in Macomb, it would be nice to actually see the audit. I think that Patrick Colbeck and others have actually requested the full report from that audit, or a copy of the image that was taken. And I don't think that anything has ever been released. I think just Mr. Forlini has said, oh, it was great, we did an audit. But I don't know that anyone's actually been able to access the data.
Yeah. Because to me, voter history and voter ID numbers, it's my understanding that when you first voted and when I first voted many moons ago, we were issued a number. And that number just carries on. And I understand that they've altered those things. I'm just hoping that that can be recovered. I don't know. And voter history, too. I'm hoping it be recovered. But
well, I've seen affidavits of illegal citizens reporting to the state that they are on the voter roll and they should not be on the voter roll, obviously. So we have a number of issues, and at some point we might just need to start with a new roll, verify, that someone is a legal citizen, and we need to completely clean up the roll. But it's my understanding the feds have their own list, right? And this is just ridiculous that the state of Michigan doesn't want to show the feds the list. I mean, we
it's very telling.
Social security cards. there's federal involvement in every other way, but why can't they show the voter roll to the feds? It's just silly. It's because they have something to hide.
Amen. Obviously, no doubt about it. But anyway, thank you so much for being here, and it's so good to see you again. And we have to stay in touch of future events. I'm hoping to see some good events.
Well, Emerald Robinson is covering. So did you see yesterday there was another positive win in Fulton County, Georgia? The DOJ had obtained evidence by search warrant, and Fulton County sued Abby Lowell, who's represented the Clintons before. In fact, Abby was the attorney that prevented Clinton from being removed from office when he was impeached. They filed a civil suit, to ask for the ballots and everything to be returned. And yesterday, the judge ruled no. The federal government has an ongoing investigation and closed out the case. So that investigation is well underway. I believe there's a grand jury working there as well. And finally, we're getting down to 6 years later, we're looking at evidence, and it looks like there's going to be accountability.
That's what people have been screaming about forever. Even Maria Bartolotta on Fox News on Sunday mornings, every once in a while, she's talking about when is there going to be accountability. And I think we're going to see it this year. I think we're going to see some.
I think so too. So have a great day, Mark. Thank you so much.
Bless you, and thank you for being here, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Stefanie.
Thanks.
Bartolomo, not Bartolana.
Hey, I'm old, okay?